Hello, everybody. This is my last time, and I thoroughly enjoyed being with you. I've been thinking with my sister, if we had this when my parents were alive, and we could talk to each other this way, it would have been so very, very nice, you know? And my sister, oh, it's like we are in space. So anyway, today I want to do something completely different than I've done in the last three presentations, because the one with Gloria was different also. No? So what I told you a while ago that I was taking advantage of this wonderful, I think, a making of a communal. I think that we are maturing into the decolonial, in a way that is, it's really, it does make us, in the kind of relationality that a communal may have. So anyway, by the way, these aretes, these earrings are Fabian's.
So good on you, lady.
They are on loan. So this is what I thought I would. So I told you, yes, that I would take advantage of this and write. Yes. So I want to write, and this to me was a very good opportunity. And so what I would like to do is to read to you and comment here and there, yes, what I've been writing in these days. And I hope it's interesting, So I'll begin. So the whole thing is on communality. So Walter Mignolo, in his The Darker Side of Western Modernity, considers the communal in relation to the decolonial option. Like democracy, the common good, if you like to use such an expression, he says, the communal does not belong to anybody. Furthermore, there are horizons for living in harmony, and living in harmony is what the Latin left, the European left, and the Islamic left, along with the decolonial option and the global political society, would all have their share in building the common good. Democracy, common good are connectors that make possible pluriversality as a universal global project. The communal contribution to the common good simply asks of building global futures and avoiding for the right to be part of a totalitarian projects of liberation. The communal refers to a type of social organization that was disrupted by European invasion. The communal is an organization of all beings in accordance with non-individualistic cosmologies in which life is at the center. Coloniality has been the closure of the communal. Mignolo mentions Felix Pazzi-Paco's understanding of the communal as the collective management of resources, governing structure without a supreme position, and to the right that families have to use and benefit from what is collectively produced and shared in the communal. All forms of knowing and doing interact. So this is one version, yes, one understanding of the communal that is very much worth thinking about. The Beta Samosake Simpson presents such a connector to pluriversality, though those are not her terms. She's fighting for Anishinaabe communal existence, but quite a bit tattered. She's fighting for Anishinaabe communal to exist, but quite a bit tattered, and as such, much less tattered than the communals among indigenous peoples in this emphatically monological world that will not accept other worlds except as ornaments, as labor, as lesser than itself. That is, communals are what the colonials want constitutes the pluriversal in all of its layers. It constitutes and is constituted by beings in a particular habitat that they understand differently yet similarly, and that understanding, knowledge of the habitat informs their subjectivity, intersubjectivity. I have on the story. Mignolo then takes us to the Tawantinsuyo and its cosmological organization, and with Pachacuti Jumpkin's drawing, he shows us a communal organization of a reality, or better, a reality organized communally. One does not live alone. Everything around us, animals, rivers, mountains, IEUs organized around the cosmos, then is not living or not living alone. Life is in the center. Time spirals and the past is then in front. The habitat is matristic for certain animals. For certain animals, yes? Not all insects, not all birds, not most fish and plants are not that way at all. Think of mycelia, think of grass and cane moving everything through roots that move sideways. Think of reefs and the being in them and how that shows all manners of perduring. The brittle star reproduces through parthenogenesis, and broken limbs grow into another brittle star, and so on to bountiful heterogeneity without reduction of cosmological possibilities, of grounding of what we can do together. So here I just think that the matristic is there, but it's not what everything is, yes? And so as we're looking at the habitat and the cosmos, you know, it's good to think about all of these beings, you know, some of which are really extremely accomplished and complex in their communication with each other. Jean Casimir's IT de mis amores, sovereignty, lies in the communal both as place and as creation. The creation and the creative spirit is central as it formed new language, new spirituality, new relations, including new family that they have maintained in spite of the hatred the West has shown to it, to its needs, subjective, intersubjective grounding, connection, its singularly creative spirit. He makes clear to us that the ethos of the community is different from the ethos of the state. The ethos of the community is communal. The Haitian Revolution arose from this spirit, from a counter-plantation, he tells us, from a counter-plantation system, he tells us. In the communal of these two contradictory spaces, the communal reactivates itself daily. The idea of his amores contributes to the joy of the world. We, the ones from the South, the ones colonized, racialized, not gendered, thrown out of modernity's institutions, producing our own death, are also in a liberatory mood to reject modernity as coloniality's inscription of its meaning in our habitat, as we reject coloniality in our bones, our eyes, the skin of our bodies, the very bad taste in our mouths. Yet many communals need to re-emerge, re-exist, research, and some of us have been taken, deprived, our souls in susto when it comes to communality. Ovidio told us, I'm not sure that this is correct, of the platelera ulanta.
Platitera orange. I'll send the link.
Okay. Or the platitera ulanta. A pre-Christian figure, hand open toward the world. The uncreated light in the halo between her and the child represents the uncreated light. And that's messed up. The light sight is an action that has consequences when you look at the world. The radiant gaze sees how the plants react to light. Ovidio presents her as a reminder of the communal. And when he thinks of reconstituting the communal, the dialects, idiomatic, multilingual, regional world relating to different cosmologies, regaining the vernaculars. This is, I'm sorry, I didn't have time to clean it up a little bit. The horizon that includes the unknown, recovering the unknown in the world, recover in our sense of the world and the horizon, he tells us that and why it will be very difficult. He takes the task as a plurality of voices speaking through him. In an interview, Bernice Johnson Reagan, founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, historian of Black music, and a steady presence in the civil rights movement, protest marches, reflected on the use and effect of singing in the movement. Here is the scene. The protest was on. The police were there to disband violently their non-violent march. Every time as the cops were going to use force, a song would begin. And then an air would form around and in the circle that nothing could penetrate. That's how she puts it. They were not to be separated. They were one. The harmony, that soft cushion in the voices that she emphasizes are all there. Oh, and all there, punto. Alexander, this particular interview is very important to me. And this idea, yes, that together, just with the voice, yes, they could form, another being, a being that wasn't there before, and that in its relationship to their own task, to the cops and so on, they were extremely forceful. And I'll say a little bit more later. Alexander Wehelije, in his Habeas Viscus, follows Hortense Spiller's distinction between the body and the flesh. The flesh that for Black Afro-descending women is the non-conceptualized ground zero for meaning, while the body, color meaningful as race. The flesh is the subject arising not from gender and gendering, but from a flesh crisscrossed by the lash, creating a hieroglyphic. Wehelije tells us, and this is the part that I think is important to me. Wehelije tells us that when a slave's flesh is being torn apart by the whip, in the presence of many other slaves, each lash is felt by everyone, not as sympathy or empathy, but as collective pain in their own flesh. So, what I'm doing is I am giving you what I think are very important instances of communality, yes? And they're different, and they're different in important ways, Yeah? Robin Kelly in Race Rebels thought of public transport, buses, trains after World War II as moving theaters about the color line for Southern African Americans. Black women, domestic soldiers in uniform, suiters, young blacks, participated in these skirmishes. The color line was moved, spoken over, fights would always break out. Sometimes some white workers would be in solidarity, but mostly it was the everyday infra-political protest that created a space of meaning among Southern Black folk. Because they were just criminals to the conductors who often were clan members, carried and used guns and other weapons, and to the white riders, their transgressive meaning was created by and among African Americans and was unintelligible as such to white folk. They turned segregation into congregation. That is Kelly's language. You know, segregation and sometimes aggregation into congregation. And that congregation was an African American space only. Culture and community are essential for understanding Black working class infra-politics. Even in homes, dance halls, and churches, embedded in expressive cultures, is where much of what is choked back at work or in white-dominated public space can find expression. Congregation enables Black communities to construct and enact a sense of solidarity, to fight with each other, to maintain and struggle over a collective memory of oppression and pleasure, degradation and dignity, to debate what it means to be Black, Negro, color, and so forth. Congregation symbolized acts of free will, while segregation represented the imposition of another will. That's all Robin Kelly. Another one, African American, Latinas, Chicanas, Native women, and Asian American women. This to me is a very familiar gathering. Yes, This is my people, my sense of, you know. The women are both political and activists with different approaches to race, to intersectionality, coloniality, decoloniality, postcoloniality. They are not divas or made into stars, but seriously into the need to change their society. They are going to be together just to talk and build something for a couple of weeks. They begin by offering descriptions of experience that emphasize the difficulties in coming up with anything other than everything needs to go. As they begin to listen to each other, the interaction moves to understanding each other's larger views, their perceptions, their historical situatedness, the philosophies, cosmologies in their way of inhabiting reality. We're here for that. Each one is an embodied being, is an embodied living deposit of knowledge, ways of living or being with others. Each can become that to the others reciprocally. The question here is one of transforming the aggregate into congregation, into a beehive-like communal presence that fills the circle with a complexity that begins to make sense of being together. Together we can reach for, navigate, perceive the transformation in each principle and sensing of the world we inhabit, an awakening of energetic embodiment tied to a keenness of feeling. What I'm searching for within this consciousness of manyness is the path both to communality and the communal for those of us who in the South, in our bodies, in our souls, have become without mother, without languages to speak to our habitat, overwhelmed by a sense of lack that is certainly not total, by an atrophied communal spirit, a relationality that does not congeal in communal knowledges that are disturbing and bring us back over and over to a sense of the real that negates our possibilities. I can speak about what I would like, what I desire. And here I put the mine, our possibilities. And yes, that I think that state of the person where one is, dissipating boundaries. Yeah. Okay, so what, but that is not a good beginning. Rather, I would like to think from a familiar beginning, what I see as possible senses toward communality in lives living in struggle that is and against a resistance, but one that is thoughtful, that comes from places, Marx, palimpsests, that one uncovers in oneself and others gently, in uncertainty, and in a flight that is a flight from modernity coloniality. I think so far of two paths that are both joyful, demanding, and require our full attention in the task of calling the communal every day and in our everydayness. So here I am very, I'm thinking, yes, of people that are, I mean, they are the people I live with, the people I talk to, the people I do popular education, that I do protests and so on. There is people that don't have that, that communal place that is secured, yes, by their own communality, yes? We don't have that. So what do we do? Yes, because I think in those meetings that I said, all those women there, we may feel bereft, but we are also, looking for, in our possibilities, company, yes? And that company is not a company that is, it's a deep company, yes, that I'm thinking of. Okay. So the first one is learning each other, which is something that we have talked about, yes? So learning each other is something deep in me, but I have seen both its lack and the passion that takes women of color to each other. I began thinking about multiplicity and what what then called world traveling as one of the ways of living epistemically alert to women of color. I have brought to the decolonial school over and over this learning each other, and I see with a sense of connection that you're also thinking of learning each other as crucial, and that is, I think that what I want is to work more on it, yes? So interculturality can be one modality of learning each other. Coming to know each other's loci of an initiation can be another. But I want to see through women of color's eyes, to perceive their reality, not necessarily their interiority. I want to look for also when as I'm going into their perception, is I want to look for ways in which their perception includes transculturation, assimilation, yes, and so that I can, not just think it's all about, the cosmology. I gave a talk in Cornell and for the indigenous studies, and I can't remember his name right now, but he asked me, why do you begin with the cosmology and not with the people? And that it's an important question to me, yes? I begin with the cosmology and not with the people because the cosmology is more accessible. People have written about it, but the people, yes, required an enormous amount of time, attention, and at this time in my life, it's not something I have, but I wish I had happened. So, so I want to see through women of color eyes to perceive their reality, and look for transculturation, for assimilated tendrils, for the being that inhabits a being in the making outside the confines of a dehumanizing reality that has us be born from an ancestry that is founded on the rape of an indigenous woman, or who was turned into property, and that's a thing that our men are valued through procreation, just as the domestic animals. And here, yes, when I'm thinking, I have made for myself a claim, yes. Mestizas come from rape. Yes, and so if we come from rape, why are we ever thinking that we owe, the other side, that we are two sides and one of those sides, is the Spanish side? Yes, and then we need to think about it and we care. Yes, I think about it with a certain measure of hatred. We do this learning for the sake of and towards communality. And that's not an aim, it's a passion and a necessity. Yes. So when I think about being with others that are in the situation of, needing the communal and needing communality in themselves, shifting from I to we, I think of both of our being bereft, but also about this necessity, yes, that takes us, inspirits us to take each other very, very seriously. So the second and certainly intertwined path is the path from I to we. In pilgrimages, I have consistently inhabited the I to we. I explore that movement as a movement towards communal springs from within people in creative struggle with a history of coloniality, modernity that sometimes they do not understand. I think of communality both in the direction of the self and toward what there is, particularly in one's habitat, including male and female people of the yet to be defined or conceived humanity. This makes the understanding complex, particularly because communal, conceived as a good thing, is many, with an overarching logic, but with differences in range, intensity, and body presence, and so on. So far, I am understanding the communal in relation to the coloniality and coalition without overwhelming the church. Yes. An aspect of communality, so I'm now going to give more understandings. Yes, so an aspect of communality is an openness that does not focus on one's own understanding of reality and seeks to take others' realities in, often in bits and pieces, one's attention following relations, integrations, and interconnections among what one takes in. One's integrity is open to greater multiplicity of meanings, sometimes for the same thing. My mother, was she mother dispossessed? Her gifts dismissed as passing the free time of day? Never developed her possibilities? Are the Hispanos Nuevo Mexicanos down, depressed, because dispossessed, but also conquerors and colonizers? The self-openness takes a path where welcoming uncertainty, moving one's attention in the circle without judgment, and further because giving up the certainty that ties one to some worlds of meaning that one inhabits familiarly to different, maybe unknown realities is disconcerting till the self quiets down and senses the cloth of people's perceptions, their beliefs, personalities, ways of addressing the habitat or ignoring it for the sake of the global. Another way I think of communality is in the inhabitant of communals who know they are of them and work to remember, going into them to recreate them, liven them, teach the children, learn from their elders, teach those who have forgotten, and from a steady communal sense of self. This is what Simpson shows us in her work, particularly in As We Have Always Done, which is, I think, the more pedagogical of her pieces. The dancing on a turtle's back, and others are the just, Lichtenberg, yeah. This is precisely what so many of us do not have. As I'm writing my thoughts, so I think I find it something we need to think about, yes? Can we learn from the Lichtenberg, or the Lichtenberg present us with a range, of they have, for example, a sense of themselves, yes, as people who need to find their own path. Others are not going to find it for them, yes? Now, that is an account, as it were, of people's living, yes? So it isn't here really about the cosmological, it's about if there is the cosmology somewhere, but it is, she does think about people doing, people relating, and to me that's very important, yes? Because as you follow what she's describing, you see the places where you are cut off, right? And that is an important place to think, yes? Because taking their way is problematic, yes? So as I'm writing my thoughts on what I think the communal in us may be and do, I think of passing on. How do ideas, ways of perceiving, attitudes move in the habitat and beyond? That is how it is that we can see deeply into the spaces and places of women of color in the global South, so that we can pass on ways of being, ideas, oral and written communications within and beyond our habitat without adopting the strategy's position. you know, and just say a few little things about the Certeau because I think is helpful. The Certeau tells us that it is only the strategies whose position high above the street and able to see, quote unquote, the whole to be structured, abstracting from the concrete in accordance with scientific rationality. While those on the ground can only be tacticians who cannot keep what they win. In pilgrimages, I disrupted the tactic strategy dichotomy. I conclude my argument with the proposal that one does not have to keep social relationality at a distance if one is to see into its depth. Yes, that is not, you know, you don't see or think or, you know, from far away. You can be in the middle of it. Yes, that one who sees into this depth is a communal subject who is dispersed, yet attentive to what one needs to go beyond, to give joy. And the knowledge is practices, ways that come from mouth to mouth and hand to hand. The communal here itself is dispersed. It's time space surprising. It's sometimes you find where you put out in the lips of someone you don't know, who is from an enormous distance from where the we included, me did our thing, and it is recognizable through no change. It is a sensing with gladness, the passing on. Yes. So my insight is that intentions understood in liberal modernity as of the individual are always social, structured to make the intention intelligible and achievable. Here, Walter's naming the social as not the communal is crucial. The sociality of labor, on the other hand, is broken. The oppressed, colonized, resistant meanings are not intelligible to the colonized oppressor. Their intentions cannot rely on structural fit for completion. The communality has to be created or recognized as meaningful to each other. And it is the communal intention that moves deeply through and into the social as the oppressed placed them in the connectivity of the social cloth. So here the communal inlas is the communal intention that does not aim at completed results among definite individuals and groups. Names, places, it's rather humbly at its task. It's a sort of flight. Printing has account of storytelling fits this communality. Communal as protest crowd pulls everybody together. I don't know whether that has anything to do with it, you know, the last sentence, you know, I have to think of. So communality also rises in people from the South at the point of open struggle. 1983, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Thousands of people jump up and down to the chant. El que no salta, perdón, es un militar. The one that doesn't jump is a milico, is a military person. In Plaza de Mayo. June 2020, thousands of people defy the cops as they take the police station in Minneapolis and show them they mean business in front of the prison and then all over the country, small cities and big cities. Now, those moments of communality are often ephemeral in our motivational makeup. Yet we come back to them. We have a memory of how to extend ourselves with fervor to the ephemeral liberal communality of open struggle. I pursue the sense of an embodied communality that defies the odds of a possible communal because people are being harmed maximally. Weheliye Spiller's understanding of the flesh as the location of the communal is what I'm trying to capture here, feeling as the conduit for consciousness of collectivity. Glissant says, this boat is a womb. a warm abyss. It generates the clamor of your protest. It also produces all the coming unanimity. It does involve empathy, but it's different from empathy because it breaks the separation that turns pain into isolation. It is not, I feel for you. Rather, it is, I, large, have become large in pain. I'm aware, pain aware, of being many together. Maybe we can become wide and long in the habitat. In the logic of modernity, the body of the colonized was not supposed to feel, just as animals were not supposed to feel. Cartesians went around torturing cats and dogs to prove it. In the coloniality, the body is marked as open to torture that doesn't hurt. The bodies are worked to death. They are violated, maimed, and killed in bizarre and horrendous ways. Feeling in one's body another's body's experience of pain defies what Elaine Scurry says about pain and torture, that it is isolating, that one loses a sense of the world in torture. I think this is true for the individual, but it is not in thought that one feels large in communal pain. The openness to such communal way of feeling embodied takes both a sense of one's situation as one that will very likely receive that pain as an individual, and the not being alone in one body as it's happening. It also takes the going over, as Johnson Reagan interprets many of the songs that create the air that is impenetrable in open struggle. Going to the other side is interpreted not just as going to heaven, but going to the side where one is not in pain anymore. To be ready, to willing to die in communal embodiment that creates a communal that moves, seeking to go beyond coloniality modernity. I think that's also a form of communality. Yes. The impulse to the intersubjective formation, of communality is one that we encounter among people, of communality, not commonality, is one that we encounter among people who are committed to find a new way of recreating the real. The question is one of presenting oneself in an aggregate of people with such radical commitments who also are interested in communality rather than hierarchical arrangements with leadership. You consider in yourself with an emphasis in clarity as to what you can bring to the encounter. At the same time, you suspend your sense of things to come, and instead you open your embodied intelligence to a sense of others' perceptive frameworks. Not so much about their interior life, the bad things that are peculiar to her, but rather that which is formed by their lived understanding of the coloniality with respect to her particular way of living with others, their knowledges, practices, ways of relation to the habitat, all in struggle to be and crisscrossed by erasures, assimilations, and transportation. How she experiences the everyday then becomes different, because it is that formation of life in the world among others. Her own particular sorrows and personal struggles come into focus in that way also. I'm open to be learned that way, and reciprocity is in the circle. Then it is our communal selves that are active, and the aggregate becomes communal, a congregation, as Robin Kelly puts the change from aggregation to congregation. I want to consider what we can bring together because we are impoverished. We're mestizas with little knowledge of who we could have become had we not been taken away from ancient communals. This is a very different way of living. It is no more difficult than having to pay attention to the horrors of bourgeois modernity among people who have not much interest in others and a lot of interest in themselves. One pays attention differently. Who has you? you can see why this is related to coalition. In coalition, the communal forms collective intentions rather than personal intentions, at least some of the time. Those intentions are hard to realize because the society in its socio-political, economic, cultural structure is not created to fulfill those intentions. Yet, if the communal enclaves, thinking, perceiving, sensing the social, to do so deeply into it, those communal intentions move in, different spatiality from hand to hand, mouth to mouth, people to people, those intent crafted offerings are picked up, taken up, countenanced by other enclaves, giving them force, enriching them, complicating them as the terrain, the local, the habitat, even new words, different ranges, and so on. And I made a note that I need help on thinking about time for you guys, because I'm not doing it that well. But so here, you know, so far what I have been thinking about is I can think about the historicity of the conquest and the coloniality and modernity. I can do that, yes. That by itself doesn't give me a communal. It does give me, yes, a way of not escaping the coloniality lightly, yes, just wishing it away, yes. So that I get, you know, a solid understanding, yeah, and the more we think, the more solid it gets, yes. And you bring to the conversation, you know, the texture of living, yes, and where is it that, you know, the possibilities of the communal have been, you know, taken away, yeah, and how they have been taken away. So I think that I am looking to those springs, you know, that we have towards each other. You know what Rolando calls relationality. You know, springs that are part of who we are. Yes, not as, you know, humans. We are that way, formed, yes, through a long time of resistance, thoughtful resistance backed by people that we don't know, and that we have in us, but we also don't know it. Yes. So noting that we don't know it becomes important, yes, rather than trying to imagine it, yes. I am in a circle, yes, and now the circle may, yes, be one that is open, you know, to learning each other and to the I, moving from the I to we, yes. That is something that it just, sometimes it just is there, yes, but most of the time it requires, you know, a lot of work in terms of taking each other in, yes. So I thought of telling you very briefly about the, I think we have a couple minutes. So the Nishnabek project of resurgence in Lian Betasamosake Simpson, because it's such a fantastic, you know, account, is of the communal being there, even if it is in many ways fragile. Yes. So the resurgence of the Nishnabek is something she expects to see every day and to take a very long time, longer than her life, for it to happen. She begins with the land, as she was an assistant to elders in a project directed by non-indigenous anthropologists who gave all authority to the elders. They would remember, the elders would remember, as they would walk, and she would have a big, big bag, the name for every beach, bay, island, and peninsula, hundreds of names. She says, we mark the trap lines, hunting grounds, berry patches, rising camps, fishing sites, medicine spots, the birthplaces and graves, the places where stories happened, the ceremonial sites where they lived, where life happened, the homes of their relatives, where moose and bear lived, nesting spots, breeding grounds, travel routes, spring water spots, song and prayers, places where field touched the earth, where promises were made. We also recorded pain, the prisoner war camp, the hydroelectric dam, the mines, the railroad tracks. The elders had these maps in their bodies. I could barely imagine the worlds that had been lost. She can appreciate the brilliance and complexity of Nishnabeg embodied thought. The Nishnabeg called their nation Hinangichi Nishnabeg Ogamig, the place where we live and work together. It is an ecology of intimacy. It is connectivity based on the sanctity of land, a web of connections to plant nations, the animal nations, the rivers and lakes, the cosmos. Indigenous resistance spring from the intensive love of land. The notion of presence is very important in her task of mapping the northern shore of lakes that elders remembered. So I want to just say it's very good for us to take the words and instead of just looking for a translation, because the translation are often not good. And when she gives a description, yes, that is very different, I think, from the translation. So she says, they are woven with each other, I say, they are woven with each other in the Nishnabeg community. Kobade, a very important concept, is the chain of ancestors and those who will come. The emphasis shifts quickly from grandmothers telling stories to the grandchildren's lives. The attention to the children is great. The Nishnabeg are not shown a path. They must find it, so the children must find it. Kobade means a link in a chain between generations, between nations, between states of being, between individuals. Our nation is a long kobade cycling through time, she says. Connectivity is central, and it is based on the sanctity of land. For my kobade to survive and flourish, she says, the next 400 years, we need to join together in a rebellion of love, persistence, commitment, and profound caring, and create constellations of coexistence, working together on the road toward a radical alternative, present, based on deep reciprocity and the gorgeous generative refusal of colonial recognition. The practices and ethical processes that make the Nishnabeg, the how we organize, how we live, how we engage in the world, how that changes us is important, and it is one of the concepts here that is the Nishnabeg win. It is the grounded normativity, she describes it, you know. Bis Camillan is another concept, is a re-emergence, a process of returning to ourselves, of re-engagement with things we have left behind. It is an individual and collective process of decolonization and resurgence. It is a flight out of the structure of settler colonialism and into processes and relationships of freedom and self-determination encoded in Anishinaabe grounded normativity. Oh, in Anishinaabe. Kwe is not woman. So Kwe cannot be translated as woman. It is fluid, is not reserved for a small part of life having to do with reproduction. Anishinaabe Kwe are central to resurgence, understood as a refusal of dispossession of both indigenous bodies and land, and the formation of networks of constellations of radical resurgent organizing as direct action with grounded normativities. The intersubjective is central to the book, to this book. She says, let's talk about how relationality plays out in indigenous context. Part of being in a meaningful relation with another being is recognizing who they are. It is reflecting back to them their essences and worth as being. It is mirroring. Positive mirroring creates positive identities. And the expression is, I see your light. And to me, this was a very, very felicitous, a very powerful way of encountering another person. Yes, so she sees it, the person as Anishinaabe, you know, and to be Anishinaabe is to have this light. Yes, and I was taken by that, and I thought maybe that's something that we could develop, you know, so that as we are learning each other and as we are trying to figure out what's possible for us, maybe when we encounter each other, we can see each other's light. Yes? Okay. So maybe now we could have a conversation. I hope that this wasn't boring because it was long. I see my, oh, thank you. Oops, porquerías. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Shall we open the floor for conversation?
Absolutely. And I wrote this while we were together here, you know, so I didn't have that much time to review everything, you know, so it's a good thing that we're together. Maybe we can think about it together.
Thank you, Maria.